participants and listeners from around the world. I'm Kristen Schwartz, licensed midwife and MC for Gold Learning. And today in our series here, in our podcast series, I have a very special guest with me here. Today is Mars Lord. Welcome, Mars.
Thank you for having me.
It's lovely to have you here, Mars. Tell our listeners, where in the world are you?
So I'm based in London, England, in North London to be exact, and I live here with four of my five children. One has left home and lives up north in Liverpool.
Excellent. It's nice to have you here, coming to us from London, the London area. Wonderful to have you here. So, Mars, you are quite the woman. You are an activist, a birth activist. You give classes, you're a birth doula. So go into that a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your background and what you do, and how did you get to where you are today?
So I became a doula because of nosiness. I had very young twin babies, and there was a coffee morning at my older children's school, and I decided to go so that I could have free hands for a moment. I knew as soon as I arrived the twins would be taken away and I'd be able to drink tea or coffee and eat cake in peace. So whilst I was there, one of the mums was talking about the fact that she'd become a doula, and I'd never heard the term before and was really curious to know what it was and what it meant. And she explained that she'd trained with Michelle Odont and Liliana Lammers, who is an incredible doctor and an incredible doula. And I remembered thinking, well, I supported my sister when she was pregnant and when she laboured and gave birth to my niece. And a few years before, I'd supported a friend who had told her husband that I needed to be there because she needed someone to make her laugh and keep her calm in labour. And so I thought, all right, I'll give this doulaing a go, see if I like it. And because actually working with pregnant women and in maternity, etc., was never anything that interested me. So I was quite surprised when I found myself on this course. And at the end of the 4-day course, arriving home thinking, I really need another baby. Now, I already had 5 babies, so by the time I turned the key, I knew that 5 were more than enough, and actually what I wanted was to be supporting people who were having babies rather than having any more myself. And so I've been a doula now for 14 and a half years, and the longer I've done this, the more I've seen and recognised the lack of birth workers, birthkeepers of colour, and the lack of good imagery and language and information around black people and birth. And I had originally been sort of specialising in working with parents expecting multiples, but more and more I was drawn towards supporting black families. And then I realised that when I looked around, none of the doula training courses actually catered to black women. So I set up and founded Abuela Doulas, and Abuela is a Spanish word for grandmother, because I really do believe in bringing the wisdom of the grandmothers forward into modern birth. And I wanted people who would practice in cultural safety and cultural humility, who would be able to reach back into all communities, but particularly their own communities, so that we could start to see the benefits that people have when they use a doula in the shorter labours, the use of analgesia, etc. And I wanted to be able to see that within my own community. And I have 3 daughters and 2 sons, and it was important to me that when they went forward, if they went forward to have children, that they were able to have the same kind of support that I was giving to people myself. And through that grew my birth activism, learning and discovering that black women had a higher mortality rate in the perinatal period than white women was quite shocking. But what spurred me on even further was discovering that just a couple of years later, those rates had more than doubled. And I knew that it was important that I started speaking out wherever I could to whoever I could about this, and made sure that the work that I was doing was really sort of meeting the needs of my community and the communities around me. And as part of that, what I've done is I have an annual retreat for birth workers about reproductive justice, where we talk about what's going on in the world of birth and how it affects the different people groups, and then sending people out to actually practice in cultural safety and to have them starting up things that they're passionate for themselves that allow them to meet these needs. And as well as all of that, I've learned so much. I'm constantly talking about the things that I do, so I've started putting them together as sort of online courses so that people can access the information more freely. And of course, I mentioned having 5 children. One of my daughters is pregnant at the moment, and so within the next month or so, I shall be holding my first grandbaby.
How wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And I know as I think you and I, we chatted a little bit offline. And one thing that you mentioned was that was really wonderful is your daughter and also your her partner, or son-in-law. They don't have any fear of birth, right? They grew up already knowing, trusting, and that's just so wonderful.
Yes, I mean, I think for my son-in-law, he didn't realize he was supposed to be frightened of birth, so that was good.
Yeah.
And of course, when my daughter told me she was pregnant, and she said to him, "So we go to my mum because my mum knows all of this stuff, and she'll lead us right." Absolutely. So we, hired a midwife, and I've been doing antenatal sessions with them, and it's been really interesting listening to them talk about friends of theirs that have had babies or are pregnant and expecting babies, and the different things that their friends have said. So they're going to be birthing at home, and their friends have all sort of thrown their hands up in the air, crying at how awful and how dangerous and how weird and how wrong, and you name it, they've said it. And both my daughter and my son-in-law have gone back to them and said, well, actually, did you know that birthing in hospital is the new trend and has only been going on for the last 60, 70, 80
Right.
years, whereas
Yes.
birthing at home has always been the norm. And when you go into hospital to see your midwife for your checks and your appointments, because our system is very different to the American system where you
Yes.
see your OBGYN, and they said, you go in, and how long do you get to spend with that midwife, and what happens if your midwife or doctor doesn't have a lot of time for your appointment, because our midwife comes to the house
Mm.
and she sits with us for as long as she needs to.
Right.
And so now their friends are all sort of, oh well, maybe this isn't so bad. But then the latest thing that we've had, which has been quite funny, was one of my daughter's friends said to her, but how are you going to know if the baby is the right size to be born? You need
Mm.
to go to hospital to have the baby measured to check that this baby will be the right size. And my daughter said to her, but we tend to grow babies for the size of us, and
Absolutely.
I have a really experienced midwife, so I don't need to go and have a scan that isn't 100% accurate to tell me what size my baby is. I'll find out what size he is once he's been born.
That's right. So they're out in the community educating too, just like like you
Absolutely. And
are.
it's so wonderful, so wonderful.
Yes. And you mentioned statistics, and you mentioned, the statistics in your country out here. I am located in the United States. They are terrible as well for Black women. More Black women die in childbirth, more Black babies die. And
Yeah.
bringing up, we need Black birth keepers, we need Black birth workers, we need Black doulas, we need midwives, we need them all. So you've created your training and you're reaching out. And what would you like to see? What would you, in your perfect world, Mars, what would happen? What can we do? How do you hopefully see the future? What can we do here?
Yes. So what I would like to see in the future is, see, everyone says, but I don't. discriminate. I don't deliberately
Mm.
discriminate. I don't and get defensive when we talk about cultural safety and humility, etc. And what I'd like to see is people who operate in cultural awareness and cultural humility. But the education system that we have, the medical system that we have on either side of this pond of ours, isn't designed for women, firstly, and certainly not designed for black women. So I would like to see people really reach out and broaden their education and be more holistic about the work that they're doing, so that when they are supporting black women, Muslim women, Asian women, whoever they're supporting, white women, that they operate with a cultural humility where they say, do you know what? And this is a thing that we all say as birth keepers, I believe that you can birth your baby.
Mhm.
And so we need to look at what goes on around them. So ideally, I'd like to see people who say, okay, if you tell me that this is how it is, let's find a path through, and let's ensure that you and your babies come through this experience more than well.
Absolutely. And what would you tell a birth worker who says, okay, I understand all this, I want to do my part? What would you tell them? What would be a good first step?
Well, a good first step is to listen.
Hmm.
We often jump in with our knee jerk responses or a need to fix things before we know what the actual things are that we're needing to fix. And then there's an assumption that the person who's telling you what's going on with them doesn't understand wholly where they are and what it is they need. And so it's about pausing and listening, and not listening to plan our response, but listening to hear, and giving people the opportunity to talk with us and share with us. And there's a whole load of reading that can be done and learning that can be done. It shouldn't be that you need someone of another culture to continually tell you how to treat them.
Right.
And so it's about listening
Yes.
and then doing our own research and learning and then asking the questions.
That's an actual excellent point, Mars. It's and I think, as birth workers, birth professionals, or working in the medical field in general, we're so used to we need to jump to and we need to fix and we need to do, but first stepping back and listen. That was such a valuable point you made there. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
So let's talk about the presentation. We're all very excited about the presentation that you will have here at Gold for Us, Why Black Women Need Black Birth Keepers. So tell us a little bit what you will be presenting in that there, and what are you hoping our delegates will take away from it?
So I'm going to be asking a lot of questions in this presentation, because I do think that we need to remember that we're all adults and we can find out and learn, and we can respond without being spoon fed. And I've found that when we spoon feed people the answers, they don't actually take them in as much. So, I'm going to be looking at what does it mean to be culturally safe and culturally humble. And I'm going to share stories, actual stories of women and people that I've worked with or that have called me and shared their stories with me. Because I think we can hear the statistics and we can hear the things that we need to do, but sometimes it's the stories of those people that make it real for us.
Beautiful. Well, Mars, thank you so much for sitting down with me here today and talking and chatting about the presentation as well as your background here today.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Was an absolute pleasure. This presentation, Why Black Women Need Black Birth Keepers, Cultural Humility in Birth, is part of the Gold Labor Support Skills Package of 2019. And to our listeners now, please check it out. You'll find the information there at goldlearning.com. The presentation will be available October 1st of 2019. And in that package, we have so many wonderful presentations. Another presentation we have in there is how to correctly use the peanut balls during labor, caring for a family when a baby dies, dancing for birth, and spinning babies in labor. So check it out, a well-rounded package, and I hope you're joining us there. And thank you to all our listeners. And one more time, thank you to Mars Lord. Bye bye, everyone.